In 2019, Google launched Google Stadia, hoping that it would change the gaming industry forever. And who knows, if it hadn't closed down in 2022, maybe it would have. But what was Stadia? Why did it close and what happened, and why does it matter? Let's dive in. My personal journey with Stadia started at the beginning of 2019 when Google announced Stadia on a big stage at GDC. But what was Google Stadia? Well, let's learn more. In 2019, Google launched what they hoped would change gaming forever. In 2022, they announced that Google Stadia would shut down. What happened? What was it, and why did it matter? Let's dive in. My personal journey, as well as many others, started when Phil Harrison, Sundar Pichai, and even people like MatPat stood on a stage at GDC and announced Google Stadia to the world. In the months to come up to release, I excitedly dove into every piece of information, and in November 2019 I tried it out for myself. I loved it. I made Stadia my main platform, and I used it as such up until the point where they announced it would be closing. I played on my TV, on my computers, on phone, and it made me play more games than I had in years. But what was Stadia? At its core, it was a service that lets you stream games from Google servers to any device with Chrome, essentially. The thing making it different from other platforms like GeForce Now, xCloud, or Boostroid was that Stadia was a separate platform, not just a remote PC or a remote Xbox. It ran on custom server hardware. It ran on custom server blade hardware, on a custom Linux-based operating system, and it even had its own store. You bought games on Stadia and you can only play them there. These things all had good and bad sides to them. For one thing, it meant that developers needed to specifically support the platform. It also meant it could do more with less, and brought with it some unique features that, to this day, no other platform has. Google proved that cloud gaming wasn't only viable to enthusiasts, but to the general masses. At least from a technical standpoint. Even on a low bandwidth connection, the experience was solid out the door. Over time, it only improved. Partly thanks to Google's massive infrastructure, it had lower latency than most competitors and was on a technical level a marvel that would regularly blow the minds of anyone I showed it to. But even from the first moment, they were off to a rocky start. The GDC presentation was geared to some strange subset of developers, but also consumers, leading to both being confused. They apparently set aggressive internal targets and spoke to the public about teraflops of server blades and showed what the end goal was, not what the launching product would be. In a classic case of Google being Google, I guess, they sold people on the idea while delivering a minimal viable product, with a plan to deliver on those ideas over time. This is very classic Google, but it also doesn't really work well in the gaming space. It's just a few years ago that early access became a thing, and still people swear off early access to this day. To add to the injury, they were not very open, clear leading up to the launch, and people got their hardware and code sometimes days apart when it was finally time. The entire rollout and the pay-to-enter Founders Edition resulted in lots of bad press. Stadia was not off to a great start.
You're really painting a picture here.
It took months for the library of available games to even begin to take shape, with plenty of big-profile titles releasing elsewhere and never showing up on the platform. It took a lot of time also for access being opened up to all, instead of just the founders, to start hearing more than a peep from the Stadia team after the holidays, and there was a lot of radio silence in large chunks of time. And in February 2021, Google announced the closure of the first-party studios that had attracted some really big names from the industry. An arm of the organization that was meant to show off the skills and the features and capabilities of the cloud that nothing else could do. An arm that had funded and published several quite interesting indie titles already. But from the ashes of this backlash came increased developer support. Partly it's thanks to the improving porting tools and the hard work from the Stadia team. Slowly but steadily, the tone of the media actually started to change. Stadia was going from being the laughingstock of the industry among the pundits to being taken seriously for a change. Still with the occasional sly comments about the rocky road to get here, but the tone was changing. People had stopped laughing and realized it wasn't actually maybe a bad thing, but in a sense, the damage was already done. The negative coverage all over the internet became a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. So no matter how engaged and positive the community of Stadia tried to be, because we really were, because behind all the vitriol online, a strong and passionate community had formed. I was part of it, as was many of my creator friends. And then there were leaks and rumors about imminent rollouts in large areas like Turkey, Australia, India, Mexico, and even Brazil. I even heard a rumor that Mexico was supposed to launch a few days after the news broke of the closure of the platform. But yeah, at less than 3 years of the initial launch, the announcement came that Stadia was going to be no more. All purchases were refunded, and it appears that developers counting on the Stadia Pro subscription service revenue to survive seem to have gotten things sorted eventually for the most part. We can only speculate the actual reasons behind the closure, but putting the pieces and rumors that I've heard together, my guess is that the Stadia management set some aggressive targets for the first year, failed to meet them due to a multitude of reasons, asked for an extension and shifted resources around, but not enough and not fast enough, to the point where the upper management of Google still didn't see the milestones that they initially set for the years to come be met to a level they had hoped, and just caught off the spending. Google could easily have stuck out for years to come. They have the money, come on. And I think that if they had, they would have seen a great success over time, kind of like with Android and Chrome and Chromebooks before it. But the economic uncertainties of the world, failed goals that focused on the wrong things to begin with, meant that metrics and the economy just didn't pan out according to the suits of Google. Google instead decided to forever close the door to a $217 billion industry with big room to grow still. Personally, I think they blew it. It could have been handled way better from the beginning. Even with the rocky start, it could have been profitable, and they just stuck with it. With the closing, we, the gaming industry and community, we lost something. Some of the things that the Stadia team was working on, or sometimes even supported already, was kind of cutting edge, groundbreaking technology. Because you see, building legacy software for, servers sitting in the server room at some office, and building software for the cloud, well, they're two very different things. Lots of companies I know are still trying to transition away from the old way of doing things into the cloud, despite having stated that they want to or need to even survive. And the gaming industry was on the cusp of maybe even starting that journey sometime soon. Could have changed everything. My favorite piece of tech that the Stadia team was working on was the idea of Game Bus, a performance load balancer of sorts that would offload the workload to more server blades whenever the performance dropped below a certain threshold, only to shut them down again when the load spike was over. It meant a game built with this technology would never drop below a stable 60 FPS, for example. From a personal standpoint, features like crowd play or crowd choice meant new ways of interacting with you, my viewers here on YouTube. I know Twitch have some of these features, but I stream on YouTube, not Twitch. And streaming on YouTube honestly took a step back when Stadia closed. I hope we can get them back at some point with PC integrations or other cloud services or something, I don't know. But Stadia did some really interesting things. The 70% revenue share to developers from the optional monthly subscription Stadia Pro was a big deal, specifically for smaller indie developers. Graphics pipeline render cache being shared between all Stadia players meant a lot smoother frame rate for the players, and the Stadia team was apparently even working on development tools that would automate testing, and even a game AI that could adapt to your skill levels. If Stadia had been allowed to survive and grow, it could have gotten millions of new users over the next few years. It could have gotten a deal with Microsoft to bring Game Pass over to Stadia. And it could have established itself as one of the big four along Xbox, Sony, and Nintendo eventually. I once did a video on trying to estimate how big cloud gaming could grow to, and including Stadia in that. It could have been as big as Xbox or maybe even PlayStation by 2030, according to those calculations that I did then. Instead, it became laughed at and a failure. And what's worse for Google is, with the closure, the joke that Google closes things willy-nilly became true. Trust is gone. Why would a gamer, let alone a developer, come back to Google if they announce a successor to Stadia? Everyone would just assume they would meet the same fate, which would also make that same fate come true. When Google closed Stadia, for themselves, they closed more than just the platform. They also closed their own door getting into this industry ever again. The cloud gaming industry is honestly alive and well, despite Google dropping out and Amazon doing God knows what with Luna. But all that remains are remote PC or remote cloud solutions like Boostroid, GeForce Now, xCloud, PlayStation Streaming, or Shadow. The true cloud-native dream is again far away. But there are still rays of hope. Star Citizen is running economic simulations on a server and sharing that to the game clients. Microsoft Flight Simulator is using real-world weather data, and then there's whatever Ubisoft Scalar turns out to be. They are baby steps in the right direction, but in a sense, it was already so close only to be ripped out from under us by Google. Who knows when next we'll see what game devs can do when they can use multiple terabytes for assets for a single game, can load balance game rendering, or stitch together local co-op where it should be impossible. One day I'm sure we will, but the dream of a new generation of games died with Stadia. For now. What was your favorite thing about Stadia? What's your favorite thing about cloud gaming? Let's reminisce together in the comments below. Until next time, gamers.